HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Circadian Code. Lose weight, supercharge your energy, and transform your health from morning to midnight. By Satchin Panda, Ph.D. Read by Chris Sorensen. Preface. To have rhythm, to be in sync, is to be healthy. But not just any rhythm will do. Germ theory and its related breakthroughs of sanitation, vaccination, and antibiotics was the groundbreaking health development of the past century. It prevents infectious disease and led to the most dramatic rise in longevity in any century in human history. Yet living longer does not always mean living healthier. In fact, we are now witnessing a rapid increase in chronic diseases of both the mind and the body, beginning in early childhood and stretching through old age. Luckily, we are beginning to understand the cause. Our modern lifestyle is disrupting a deeply ingrained, primordial, and universal code to being healthy. The observations that I have made over the past 20 years, along with my colleagues and other researchers in the tiny field of circadian biology, are radically changing the way we understand how both the body and the mind optimally function. The science of circadian rhythms is actually a multidisciplinary field that includes biologists, exercise physiologists, mathematicians, psychologists, sleep researchers, nutritionists, endocrinologists, ophthalmologists, geneticists, oncologists, and more. Working together, we have found that simply adjusting the timing of how we live and making easy lifestyle changes is the secret to restoring our rhythm, and it will surely be the next revolution in healthcare. I invite you to learn what I have uncovered through my own research and through working with the best minds in each of these fields. I call this the Circadian Code, and by adopting these lessons you will make small changes to the way you sleep, eat, work, learn, exercise, and light up your home that will make a profound difference in every aspect of your health. In fact, the benefits you'll reap can be far more effective and long-lasting than any medication or special diet. You may have heard about circadian rhythms before. A 2017 Nobel Prize recognized this field of research for its impact on human health. But if you haven't heard of circadian rhythms, don't worry. The concept is very simple. The term circadian comes from the Latin circa, meaning around or approximately, and diem meaning day. Circadian rhythms are real biological processes that every plant, animal, and human exhibits over the course of a day. These rhythms are actually interconnected among species and are governed by internal circadian or biological clocks, which are very different from the ticking biological clock you might think about if you're worried about having kids by a certain age. As you'll learn, almost each and every one of our cells contains one of these clocks, and each is programmed to turn on or off thousands of genes at different times of the day or night. These genes influence every aspect of our health. For instance, when we are healthy, we can have a good night's sleep. In the morning, we wake up feeling fresh, energetic, and ready to get to work. Our gut function is perfectly normal. We have a healthy hunger and a clear mind. In the afternoon, we have the energy to exercise. At night, we are tired enough to go back to sleep without much effort. Yet when these daily rhythms are disturbed for as little as a day or two, our clocks cannot send out the right messages to these genes, and our body and mind will not function as well as we need. If this disruption continues for a few days, weeks, or months, we may succumb to all types of infections and diseases, ranging from insomnia to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, depression, anxiety, migraine, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, dementia, and even cancer. Luckily, it's easy to get back in sync. We can optimize our clocks in just a few weeks. By restoring our circadian rhythms, we can even reverse some of the diseases or accelerate cures, returning us to better health. My journey. Discovering the secrets of the biology of time. I was lucky to be born in 1971 and raised in India during a unique time in history. I experienced firsthand how a rapidly evolving modern society disrupts the interconnectedness of life, including our own biological rhythms. Throughout my early childhood, I lived in a small town near my maternal grandparents. My grandfather worked as a goods clerk at the local train station, where he often worked the night shift. My grandparents lived in a house with a large jasmine tree near their front gate. To me, that tree was magical. It bloomed profusely at night and would shed its flowers right before dawn, as if laying a beautiful carpet to welcome my grandfather home each morning. During summer and winter breaks, we visited my father's family, who lived on a farm in a rural part of the country. The contrast between my maternal grandfather's shift work at the train station and my paternal grandfather's life on the farm, in sync with nature, seemed like it was at least a century apart, although it was only a 2-hour road trip to get from one place to the other. For most of my childhood, their village did not have electricity, so as you can imagine, life on the farm was very different from life at my home. My relatives raised almost everything they ate. Although I don't remember my grandfather ever wearing a watch, their daily routine happened with clockwork precision that was in sync with the sun and the stars. At the crack of dawn, roosters sounded the alarm clock that woke everyone up. The whole day was spent tending to plants and animals and preparing meals. We picked fruit and vegetables or helped my uncle catch fish from the farm pond. Breakfast and lunch were the main meals, and they were feasts prepared with freshly picked vegetables and fish. Dinner was always before sunset and mostly leftovers from lunch, as it was impossible to store any cooked food overnight. The evenings were also very different. The only light we had available came from kerosene lanterns. In those days, kerosene was expensive and rationed by the government. My grandparents had a relatively large house with 6 bedrooms. We were only allowed to use the lanterns for a couple of hours in the evening, except for 2 lanterns that were placed at the ends of the veranda that flickered all night. After dinner, all of the kids would huddle around a lantern, and my mother, who was a school teacher, would quiz us. Sometimes our aunts would join us to tell stories, or my uncle would take us to the backyard to teach us the phases of the moon. I remember asking for certain fruits or vegetables. I liked to eat at home and being met with a strange look from my cousins. To them, I was a dumb town kid who didn't know which fruits and vegetables grow in what season. But what they didn't know was that my father, who had a college degree in agriculture, had introduced many high-yielding trees, vegetables, and rice varieties to my grandfather's farm. Some of these new rice strains could even grow in both the summer and winter, essentially doubling the return from the same piece of land. In this instance, disrupting the natural order of things didn't seem like such a bad idea. When I was in junior high school, I lost my father to a road accident. A truck driver who was most likely sleep-deprived lost control of his vehicle. Years later, I learned a sleep-deprived brain is more dangerous than a brain under the influence of alcohol. Yet even today, driving after a sleepless night is not illegal. After high school, I went to an agriculture school like my father had, which at the time was the fastest path to a secure job in government or banking. Whenever I visited my grandparents' rural village, my grandfather would tease me and ask if I could crack the code of nature so that he could grow any fruit or vegetable in any season. That is how I developed an interest in understanding how all living things connect to daily and seasonal time. I would also visit my maternal grandfather, who by then had retired from his job. It was only a few years after retirement that he started showing signs of dementia. My grandmother took care of him like he was a baby. I visited him almost every weekend in my senior year. I was one of only 3 or 4 people he recognized. He lost sense of day and night. He would feel hungry, sleepy, or could stay wide awake at random times. I began to notice how important the simple code of time is in our daily life. A few days after I completed college, he passed away at the age of 72. I had done well in college with a major in plant breeding and genetics. My natural next step would have been to go for a master's degree in these same subjects, but I was lucky to secure a scholarship for a master's degree in molecular biology, which in India is called biotechnology. Molecular biology was at the time a new branch of science, and it introduced me to the genetic code. Afterward, I landed a nice research job in the city of Chennai with Bushboak Allen, now International Flavors and Fragrances, which makes flavoring agents and fragrances for almost every major food company in the world. My first assignment was to figure out the chemistry of how vanilla beans get their flavor. I visited the vanilla farms in the Nilgiri Hills in southern India, where my host would wake me up around 2 a.m. to drive to the fields to show me how the workers pollinated each vanilla flower by hand as soon as it would open in the wee hours of the morning. Although the job paid well, the workers hated waking up in the middle of the night for a couple of months, and by the end of the season they were very sick. I wondered whether their sickness was some type of reaction to stuff in the field, or if it was due to losing sleep for 2 months. The field of circadian rhythm research was beginning to make headlines in top scientific journals as Jeffrey C. Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael W. Young, who together won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2017, were publishing their groundbreaking work. I soon left India for graduate school in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. It was a profound shock on many levels, the least of which was moving from 98 degrees Fahrenheit weather in India to Winnipeg, where 0-degree Fahrenheit temperatures during winter were not uncommon. The nights were so long in winter and my brain was disoriented. Was it culture shock, temperature shock, or the lack of light? Almost half of my classmates in the immunology department were feeling quite low, and they called it the winter blues. The effect of long Winnipeg nights on my circadian rhythm and mood rekindled my interest in the field. After just 1 winter, I managed to move to San Diego. That's where I put all my life's questions and experiences into one field of research. I began to formally study circadian rhythms. For the past 21 years, I've devoted my life to this research. As a graduate student at the Scripps Research Institute in La Jolla, California, I worked on understanding how plants measure time. The most exciting part was being in a lab that was at the forefront of the field. This was when we first discovered that there were clock genes in both plants and animals. Our work involved uncovering the mystery of how these clocks work. Every day was thrilling, almost like sitting in the front row of your favorite Broadway show every night. I was part of the team that discovered how specific plant clock genes work together to tell plants when to photosynthesize and absorb carbon dioxide for fuel, and when to sleep or repair themselves. One of the plant genes I discovered allowed us a better understanding of how the circadian clock, metabolism, and DNA repair may be connected. In 2001, I was invited to do my postdoctoral research at the newly founded Genomics Institute of the Novartis Research Foundation, GNF, where I would be working on animal clocks. This premier institute squarely focused on using the newly described human and mouse genome to understand biology. I was there to solve mysteries in circadian biology. My first breakthrough came in the first year. I was able to explain how our circadian rhythms adjust to different seasons or different types of light. My team discovered an elusive blue light sensor in the eye's retina that sends light signals to the brain clock to tell it when it is morning and when it is night. Having a handle on the light sensor helped us figure out how much light, of which color, for how long, and at what time of the day we need to advance or delay our clock. That was a huge discovery because for almost 100 years, scientists had known that there was a light sensor in the eye, but they didn't have any idea where it was or what it did. This discovery was cited among the top 10 breakthroughs of 2002 by the prestigious Science magazine, and it is the reason why your smartphone or tablet lets you change its background color from bright white to a dimmer orange a few hours before your scheduled sleep time. It took us almost 8 years to determine how this light sensor worked, how it transfers information from the eye to the brain, and which brain regions receive that information in order to regulate sleep, depression, circadian rhythm, and pain. Even today, I am still trying to figure out the full extent to which light affects circadian rhythm and how modern lighting affects this process. Yet it's been very gratifying to see how our discovery went from simple observation to adoption, enabling more than 1 billion people to be aware of the impact of light on their health in just 15 years. A second point of inquiry was to determine how our internal clocks transmit their timing information and how our organs read time and do different tasks at specific times. We started using very modern genomic technology to monitor which genes turn on and off at different times in different organs. This research began in 2002, and since then we have had another big breakthrough. The discovery that hundreds to thousands of genes in both the brain and liver turn on and off at specific times. We are still extending these experiments to different organs, tissues, brain centers, and glands. We are finding that almost every organ has its own clock, and in each organ genes turn on or off, affecting protein production levels at predictable times of the day. After starting my own lab at the prestigious Salk Institute for Biological Studies, I continued my clock research in collaboration with outstanding colleagues. We now know that to have predictable circadian rhythms is to have healthy organs. Just like a mutation in the genetic code can lead to disease, living in opposition to the circadian code can push us toward disease. Over the past few years, I have had the good fortune to work with some of the great minds in the fields of cardiovascular and metabolic diseases, and together we have found that animals that lack a normal clock are highly predisposed to these diseases. Slowly, it became clear that a disrupted clock is the mother of all maladies, and conversely, in most chronic diseases, clock function is compromised. Finally, in 2009, these two areas of my research, light and time, came together. Extending the research of 2 prior studies, we created a simple experiment where we kept mice in a specific light-dark cycle. Mice are usually nocturnal and eat at night. But in the experiment, we gave them food during the daytime and then watched to see what happened with their internal clocks. Surprisingly, we found that almost every liver gene that ever turns on and off within a 24-hour period completely ignored the light signal and instead were synced to when the mice ate and fasted. We also learned from this experiment that a daily eating-fasting cycle drives almost every rhythm in the liver. Instead of thinking that all timing information comes from the outside world through the eye's blue light sensor, we learned that just like the first light of the morning resets our brain clock, the first bite of the morning resets all other organ clocks. Then in 2012, we pushed the envelope even further. We wanted to see if disease was not only linked to diet, but also to the breakdown of the circadian code. Thousands of research papers had shown that when mice are given free access to fatty and sugary foods, they become obese and diabetic within a few weeks. We compared one set of mice having free access to the fatty diet to a second group that had to eat all their food within an 8 to 12-hour period. What we found was startling. Mice that eat the same number of calories from the same foods within 12 hours or less every day are completely protected from obesity, diabetes, liver, and heart disease. More surprising, when we put sick mice on this scheduled feeding, we could reverse their disease without medication or change in diet. Initially, the scientific community was skeptical of our discovery. The conventional wisdom was that what and how much we eat determined our health. But slowly, similar observations began to pour in from laboratories around the world, including from human studies. Now we know that in addition to what and how much we eat, when we eat matters. Many important medical groups have taken note of our findings and have done their own literature review to find if timing of food intake matters. For instance, the National Institutes of Health, the American Heart Association, and the American Diabetes Association, among others, believe, as I do, that resetting the circadian clock is our next best hope to prevent or to accelerate the cure of chronic diseases. In 2017, the American Heart Association released their first recommendation on meal timing and frequency in almost 70 years that corroborates our research, showing how eating patterns might be used as a way to prevent or reduce cardiovascular disease. This audiobook, based on my research, is meant to give you the tools you can use to optimize your clock by making simple lifestyle changes. The stakes have never been higher. Today, almost 1/3 of all adults suffer from at least one chronic disease, such as obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, respiratory disease, asthma, or chronic inflammation. By the time of retirement, adults in the United States typically have 2 or more chronic diseases. And the truth about chronic disease is that there is rarely a cure. There aren't many people with diabetes who go completely back to normal. A person with cardiovascular disease rarely goes back to normal. We just have better ways to manage and live with these diseases. That changes now. In this audiobook, I offer you very simple ideas and practices you can use on a daily basis that have been proven in rigorous laboratory research to prevent or delay the onset of disease. Here's just one more thing you need to know about me. My science is supported by the U.S. government and thrives because of honest taxpayers and philanthropists like you. If this research can inspire 1 million people to make these small changes and delay one chronic disease by just 1 year, it can provide an estimated savings of at least $2 billion annually to the U.S. economy. This research is my gift to you because I feel so deeply indebted to this country. In 2001, I was a foreign national having just finished my PhD with an F1 visa. I was very excited to continue my postdoc research at GNF and had just applied for an H-1B visa. Any foreign national knows the gut-wrenching anxiety of waiting for your work visa. And then 9/11 happened. At about 5 p.m. on September 12, 2001, the Human Resource Director of GNF walked toward my desk with a piece of paper in her hand. My worst fear came to my mind, that the government must have rejected my H-1B visa, but instead I learned that it had been approved earlier that day. It was then I realized that this country, my new home, must be awesome, because on September 12th, when I could not focus on my work in the lab, being completely overcome with the previous day's events, somebody on the East Coast actually went to work, looked at my application, and approved it. That was the day I decided to stay in this country forever and pay it forward. This is why I'm sharing my research with you, and I hope that you can benefit from it. How this audiobook works. Addressing your circadian clock is more than a diet. In fact, it's not a diet at all. It's a lifestyle. It begins with knowing when to eat and when to turn off the lights. Just paying attention to those small parts of your day will go a long way toward preventing and delaying disease. As you'll learn, we are easily vulnerable to disrupting our circadian rhythm. All it takes is the slightest upset from an overnight flight, a poor night's sleep, illness, or a disruptive work schedule. The The circadian code can be a powerful tool to manage your waking day, whether you are a parent or a child, especially a teenager, millennial or retired. Regular workers, shift workers, working moms, and health enthusiasts can all benefit. If you are dealing with one or more chronic diseases, you need to listen to this audiobook. No matter who you are, you'll learn when is the best time for you to eat, work, and exercise during the day, and how to manage the evening hours so that you can get the best, most restful sleep. First and foremost, this audiobook is about prevention, but you can also use this information to live better now. Part 1 focuses on identifying how the circadian clocks in the body work, and why maintaining perfect timing is of utmost importance for both children and adults. The first step on the road to health is to recognize if you are in fact unwell, and this section includes a simple quiz to see how your health is currently affecting your rhythm. You will also start tracking your timing so you can see where adjustments need to be made. Part 2 features complete instructions on how best to use your day to maximize your internal rhythms. You will learn exactly when and what to eat, but not how much. There is no calorie counting on this program, but I can say that if you do follow the guidelines I suggest, weight loss is almost inevitable. You'll learn when is the optimal time of day to work and be productive, as well as when is the best time to exercise. You'll also discover new techniques for getting a better night's sleep, as well as technology that can enhance and track your total experience. As we age, disruptions to our circadian rhythm affect us more than when we are young. I believe that most of the diseases that affect us in adulthood can be traced back to circadian disruption. Part 3 addresses specific ailments and how they relate to our circadian rhythms. This section covers cancers and other immune system issues, the components of metabolic syndrome, heart disease, obesity and diabetes, and neurological health including depression, dementia, Parkinson's disease, and other neurodegenerative issues. You'll also learn how the gut's microbiome is influenced by your internal rhythms and how conditions like acid reflux, heartburn, and inflammatory bowel disease can be addressed. I'm not a medical doctor, so I cannot prescribe medications. The scientist in me reminds me every day how little we really know about how the body works. But I can share with great certainty what I know about this powerful, primordial, inescapable rhythm we have, including my best advice for optimizing your daily routines. Please share this information about daily habits that optimize our circadian rhythms with your doctor or other health practitioner so that he or she can make better decisions about treatment options or courses of action. With the tools given inside this audiobook, it's very likely that you'll be able to get your health back on track. Part 1. The Circadian Clock. Chapter 1. We are all shift workers. If you are a card-carrying shift worker who wakes up in the middle of the night to go to work, returns from work late at night, or stays awake all night, you know how it feels to be living against a primitive, primordial drive to sleep at night and stay awake during the day. But even if you're not, I'm sure you can remember a time when you were fighting against your internal clock. The truth is, we are all shift workers. There are times in life when we go through chronic sleep disruption, and for many, those habits linger. If you pull an all-nighter at school or work, stay up late studying for a test, have a bad night's sleep, travel across several time zones, stay awake late into the night to tend to a sick relative, or wake up a few times to feed and change a baby, then you too are a shift worker. A full-time job with long commutes combined with a regular home routine is like working 2 shifts and going to bed past midnight. Even one late night of partying can be just as disruptive as traveling from one time zone to another. That's why we call it social jet lag. The statement that we are all shift workers isn't just an idea. Data points to this fact. For example, Professor Till Roneberg, a researcher...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?